happens when the planet of restriction and limitation is found in the element associated with feeling and emotion? When Saturn is in water, emotion is the structure that this structure-obsessed planet is after. And since this is the case, there's an extremely important question to answer. Are the feelings conscious and accepted, or are they shoved underground? Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another, said Einstein. When emotion isn't expressed, it doesn't go away. It becomes something else: compulsion, aberration, illness, accidents that appear to come from the outside but are really designed within. Saturn is blockage, and in water, he blocks feeling. That means your primary responsibility here is to be real about the expression of feeling. Even though this is an ordinary part of life, a watery Saturn makes the expression of the emotional nature difficult because there's usually a kind of denial that goes on. And feeling becomes a river that's flowing underneath all events. We're affected by this flow, but unaware of it, which is where the trouble comes in. And it doesn't work out to bail on emotion altogether, because emotion makes life meaningful and memorable. Fortunately or unfortunately, every one of us has a Saturn. You would have to be born on Saturn to escape having one in your chart. So we all have this representation of a place where we're weak and easily discouraged. Our Saturn shows our likely failures and dissatisfactions. In the case of water, those tend to be emotional. However, we can also look at him as a master builder and strengthener. Never forget that in the body, this planet is associated with the skeleton. Bones break, they're broken by others. That's what it's like when Saturn's weak. You're crippled, hobbling around. But a broken bone is healed through the body reweaving the fractured area, so that by the end of the healing process, the point of the break is stronger than it was to begin with. A similar process happens in the psyche. Forgiveness and love are woven into our crippled places so that what was once broken is stronger than it was to begin. That's how Saturn functions. This Saturn is linked to the domain of family and childhood. So you can imagine that the planet of restriction and limitation might wreak some havoc here. Saturn in Cancer speaks to problems with the earliest environment. We all have an early atmosphere, a place we were before we had any choice in the matter, before we had a conscious mind and the ability to analyze, a time when we simply absorbed what was there. When Saturn's in the sign of the crab, there are issues with that environment, and it usually leads to an intense need for inner security and for tight bonds with the family itself. And so, because we are talking about Saturn, and he brings the opposite of what we think would make us happy, we generally see a lack of family stability. There's disruption and uncertainty, often even from the time in utero. Likewise, since Saturn is the planet of work, we regularly find this placement is born with a job of some kind, a reason for their conception. Perhaps the point was an attempt to keep a marriage together or a means to prove the father's fertility. Saturn in Cancer is sentimental and drawn to genealogy. They like to explore the branches of the genetic tree to cement their place or to find some wisdom and understanding. You see, Saturn in Cancer values the family and the tribe, and they find a great deal of pain in isolation. This placement can indicate issues with bonding, and it's prone to traumatic bonding, love based in anxiety. Saturn in Cancer feels a lot of anguish over these things, and that has to be dealt with on a trusted therapist's couch. This is an overly sensitive Saturn that often has to work on the taboo elements of family, like the rage, envy, jealousy, seduction, abandonment, all the anti-hallmark undercurrents that are often the reality of family life. The other thing that can happen with this Saturn is enmeshment, being severely tied to the ancestors, the place of birth, the geography of the family. Sometimes the craving for closeness just isn't there, and being suffocated passes for love. And in that situation, individuality and appreciation of authenticity is just not part of the picture. Once these things are worked on, Saturn in Cancer has a huge heart and a reservoir of affection to offer. They can become masters at intimacy, commitment, true love, caring, nurturing, and have the ability to teach this to others in a leadership capacity. Finally, they may experience being the family scapegoat, the black sheep, the outsider. And their sense of heritage may also be blocked in one way or another. What this Saturn indicates is that through diving deep into the psyche, the person can find a sense of origin that's unshakable, particularly as the child of a parental deity in a spiritual family. Saturn in Scorpio deals with strong emotion, points of no return, transformation, and death and rebirth. Here we see a person who tends to have crises, especially the ones associated with the close emotional ties in their lives. It's the Saturn most likely to learn from broken trust and betrayal. Those extremely painful emotional scenes teach us a lot about self-sufficiency. The point is to bring the native into important, deep areas of their own feeling nature. It sits in the sign of money, shared resources, and power. So this Saturn tends to get into complicated situations where money is power, money is bondage, and both money and power are wrapped up in emotional entanglements. For instance, they might be in a marriage where money issues are a cover for problems with love and generosity, or where emotional dysfunction masquerades as impotence or frigidity. Saturn in Scorpio is rather subterranean about these things, but all of its blocks, restrictions, and limitations are actually about hidden emotional misery. There is, in short, often difficulty with the sweeter forms of emotional expression and love. And it's usually not very sexually free either. You see, sexual expression says a lot about the holistic health of a person. Often with this placement, you find an early environment where sexual problems between the parents fill the atmosphere with tension, which of course the child pulls in and ends up carrying. They go into adulthood with the idea that this part of life will be rife with conflict and disappointment and inadequacy. This placement often represents a deep fear of being controlled, too. Sex is a perfect place for Saturn to feel like they can really shut their partner down and shut them out, inflicting various types of unconscious pain. This Saturn is a serious one, and it finds its truest happiness in a trusting union. But for that to happen, they have to clear the psychological crap away. They have to explore the unconscious and the past and overcome the traumas they've experienced. When healthy and well functioning, this placement can easily find its niche in sex and intimacy education, maybe marriage therapies, and helping others with the emotional side of finances. Saturn in the eighth sign is one of the more difficult of the zodiac because it deals with the most complex energies the mind has to offer. And it's stricken with blockages in the areas of life that already tend to be minefields. But in the end, it has to do with learning about the emotional flow, emotional power, and transformation of the inner depths. We know that all the water signs are unconscious, but Pisces is the ocean of the wheel. And the ocean is almost entirely unknown and unseen from the surface. There are a great many fears swimming in the darkness below, and this placement is plagued with phobias and unknown motivations. Saturn here is basically denied the normal conscious functions of Saturn: organizing and structuring, achieving, and adhering to the world of matter, the real world. So the placement in question has trouble with all of these things, and it's usually blocked in dealing with routine, mundane tasks, those pesky details of life. What you see with Saturn in the 12th sign is an accentuated version of what you see with every Saturn in the zodiac, and that is an expression of extremes. And this placement is uniquely difficult because we have the planet of order in the sign of chaos. We might see it expressed as an utterly flaky, irresponsible, extremely fluid person who tries whatever they stumble across. Or they may defend against that chaos by being extremely rigid, a real stiff, a teetotaler. I once knew a Saturn in Pisces who mixed both ends of that continuum. She appeared to be fluid, and in some ways, she was the flowiest hippie imaginable. But as I stayed around for a while, I noticed that the other fish was a dictator, someone so controlling that she wanted to choose her girlfriend's hairstyle and everything about the house and how each penny was spent. It was quite mind-blowing because of how sharp that dichotomy was. But dichotomy is a theme for Pisces. All Saturns by nature like disguise, but this is one that's especially slippery because of the dual nature of Pisces. They often feel imprisoned by their life circumstances. All the unconscious pain acts as a motivator for healing, and when that is well done, what emerges is a person who has created a spiritual reality, who has brought the divine down to earth through spiritual practices such as forgiveness or intensive meditation. The last sign of the wheel wishes to lose individual identity and atomize into a kind of cloud, a spiritual ecstatic state, or a drunkenness. Now, this can either be done with no knowledge of the self or with the wisdom of a lifetime. Thank you for watching Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk, Saturn in Water. Stay tuned for all the ways you can get in touch for a birth chart reading and full astrological services. I'm Joy. More videos to come.